The doctor's words still echo in my head. Is there any chance you two share the same bloodline? My wife froze. I felt the air leave my lungs. That night, the silence between us was louder than any scream. I never imagined love could feel so forbidden. My name is Owen White. I'm 36, a software engineer living in Seattle. I used to believe in logic, cause and effect, order and chaos, and I believed in love, the kind that makes you feel safe, the kind you build a life around without ever questioning how it began. Harper and I met in college. She was studying fine arts. I was buried in algorithms. She drew. I analyzed. Somehow, it worked. She said I made her feel grounded, and she made me feel alive. We started dating after a group project. I fixed her laptop, and she painted my portrait as a thank you. I still have it. We got married 2 years after graduation, just the two of us and a few close friends. She wore a dress she made herself, with tiny embroidered leaves along the hem. I remember thinking no one had ever looked so real, so human. Life after that felt easy, the kind of happiness that doesn't need to be announced. I worked from home. She taught art to kids at a local studio. Every evening she came home smelling of acrylic paint and jasmine tea. We'd have dinner by the window, talk about everything and nothing. Sometimes I'd look at her across the table and think, I could live 1,000 lives and she'd still be the one I'd find. When she told me she was pregnant, I froze for a second, then laughed so hard I almost dropped my coffee. We spent that night lying on the living room floor, talking about names, imagining the kind of parents we'd be. She wanted a child who'd be curious about the world. I wanted one who'd never feel alone. Those months were the happiest I've ever known. We painted the nursery light green. She sang softly every night, said the baby could already hear her voice. I learned to cook, built furniture from scratch, planned weekend trips we'd take once the baby arrived. Everything felt like the start of something perfect. I remember one afternoon, she stood by the window, her hand resting on her stomach, sunlight spilling over her hair. She turned to me and said, I think this is what peace feels like. And I believed her. Back then, we didn't know how fragile peace could be. How one sentence from a stranger in a white coat could shatter everything you thought you understood about love, family, and destiny. If I close my eyes now, I can still see that version of us, laughing, innocent, unaware of the storm waiting just beyond the next heartbeat. When Harper found out she was pregnant, everything changed. Our world suddenly became softer, slower, filled with small, fragile hopes. She taped the first ultrasound photo on the fridge and wrote, Hi, little one, beneath it. Every morning before leaving for work, I'd stop and stare at that tiny blur, trying to imagine the sound of a heartbeat that wasn't mine. We bought a crib before we even knew the gender, painted the nursery pale green. She wanted something neutral, calm, like a meadow after rain. I put together furniture late into the night, cursing at screws that didn't fit while she laughed from the doorway, holding a cup of tea against her belly. We argued about names, about which lullaby would be the first our child would hear. Every argument ended in laughter and a kiss. Life felt beautifully predictable. At the 6th-month checkup, we sat in the cold room, fingers laced. The doctor smiled as he moved the probe, the grainy image flickering on the screen. Then he paused. Everything looks fine, he said, but there's something unusual. It seems the baby has an extra toe. An extra toe? Harper repeated, half laughing, half uncertain. It's called polydactyly, the doctor explained gently. A congenital condition, usually harmless, sometimes hereditary. Do either of you know anyone in the family with it? We shook our heads. Harper squeezed my hand a little tighter. No, none that we know of. He smiled. Then it's probably just a spontaneous mutation, nothing to worry about. On the way home, Harper was quiet. I turned the radio on, some old song from our college days. She finally said, It doesn't mean he'll be sick, right? No, I said quickly. It's just one extra toe. Maybe it'll make him a better swimmer. She smiled then, small, soft, almost shy. Maybe. We laughed about it for days afterward. Her students made jokes at school, calling the baby Spider Kid. We joined in, pretending it was our little family secret. I told everyone our child would stand out from birth, that he was literally one step ahead. But at night, when the house went quiet, I sometimes caught Harper tracing her stomach, whispering something I couldn't hear. The day he was born, everything else faded. The monitors beeped, nurses rushed, and then a cry, loud, defiant, beautiful. I cut the cord myself. Harper looked at me through tears and said, "He's perfect." And he was. 10 fingers, 12 tiny toes. We counted them together, laughing. The doctor smiled and said, "Perfectly healthy." That was all we needed to hear. I kissed Harper's forehead and whispered, "We did it." For months afterward, life was pure light. I'd wake up to the sound of Harper humming, the baby's soft coos echoing through the house. Every sound felt like proof that we were doing something right. Every heartbeat, every breath, a promise that our love had created something whole. Neither of us knew it then, that what we dismissed as a harmless detail would one day return, sharp and merciless, to unravel everything we believed about who we were. But in those moments, we were simply two people in love, holding a child who had no idea he carried the first trace of our undoing. A year later, Harper was pregnant again. We hadn't planned it, but when she told me, her hands shaking slightly, I felt the same rush of joy I had the first time. The smell of paint, the small clothes, the sound of laughter, all of it returned like a song we already knew by heart. We switched to a new hospital, closer to her work. Everything felt familiar. The appointments, the steady rhythm of the ultrasound, her fingers curled around mine. I thought this would be another quiet chapter in our story. At the 6-month checkup, Dr. Miller, calm, gray-haired, kind, moved the probe across Harper's stomach. The baby appeared on the screen, tiny legs kicking. Then his expression shifted. He leaned closer, adjusted the focus, paused. "Everything looks healthy," he said slowly, "but it seems this baby also has an extra toe." The room went silent. I stared at him, thinking I'd heard wrong. Harper blinked. "Also?" He nodded. "Your first child had the same condition, right? Polydactyly?" "Yes," I said, forcing a smile, "but we were told it wasn't genetic." The doctor hesitated. "It usually isn't. But 2 children with the identical anomaly, that's very uncommon." Harper looked at me, confused, frightened. I squeezed her hand, but mine was trembling too. Dr. Miller cleared his throat. "Please don't take this the wrong way," he said gently. "I have to ask, is there any chance you two are biologically related?" For a moment, the world just stopped. Related? The word hung in the air like a bad echo. I laughed awkwardly, waiting for him to say he was kidding. He didn't. Harper's voice cracked. "What are you saying?" He sighed. "It's just a question I'm required to ask when patterns like this appear. No judgment." Her face went pale. Tears welled up. No, that's impossible." I held her tighter. "He's only being cautious, Harper. Don't let it get to you." But she didn't answer. She just kept staring at the monitor, at that tiny foot with 1 extra toe, like it was something monstrous. The doctor apologized softly and left us alone. The room felt suddenly cold, the hum of the machines loud and steady, as if mocking us. On the drive home, Harper barely spoke. She kept her hand on her stomach the whole way, eyes fixed on nothing. When we reached the house, she whispered, almost to herself, "Why would he even ask that?" I didn't know what to say. I told her it was a coincidence, that we were fine, that love doesn't need explanations. But deep down, something had shifted. For the first time, I caught myself wondering if the doctor had seen something we hadn't, something waiting, buried beneath our perfect little life. Harper stopped sleeping. Nights grew longer, heavier. I'd wake at 2 or 3 in the morning to find her sitting at the edge of the bed, the baby monitor glowing faintly beside her. She'd be staring at the screen, at our son's small, peaceful body, like she was waiting for something to happen. At first, I thought it was normal, new mothers worry. But it didn't stop. She'd hold Noah's tiny foot in her hands, tracing each toe as if counting could make sense of it. Sometimes she'd start crying without a sound, just tears sliding down her cheeks, quiet and endless. When I asked what was wrong, she'd shake her head. "Nothing. I'm just tired." But her voice trembled. Her eyes never met mine. Days passed like that. The doctor's question lingered in the air, invisible but everywhere. I tried to forget it. I buried myself in work, in diapers, in anything that felt normal. But Harper couldn't. It followed her like a shadow. One night, I woke up to the sound of her whispering. She was in the nursery, sitting on the floor, phone in her hand. The light from the screen painted her face pale. When she realized I was there, she quickly locked it and looked away. "What are you doing?" I asked softly. She hesitated. "Reading about genetic disorders," she said finally. "About inheritance patterns." I sighed, walked over, knelt beside her. "Harper, you're overthinking it. The doctor was just being careful." She looked up at me then, eyes red, face pale, hands trembling. "Owen, what if he wasn't?" I froze. "You can't let that question get inside your head," I said. "It's not real. We're fine." She shook her head. "But how do we know that? What if there's something we don't know?" Her words stayed with me long after she fell asleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the baby's soft breathing through the monitor. I told myself she was just scared, that this was postpartum anxiety, hormones, exhaustion. But deep down, I felt it too. That strange unease, that quiet pull of doubt that creeps in when love meets uncertainty. Over the next weeks, Harper grew distant. She stopped laughing at my jokes. She moved slower, spoke less. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me, not lovingly, not angrily, but with something colder, something closer to fear. One evening, while feeding Noah, she said quietly, "He looks like you." I smiled. "Of course he does." But she didn't smile back. "That's what scares me," she whispered. I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that nothing could ever separate us, but I could feel the wall growing between us, invisible yet solid, built from silence and sleepless nights. The doctor's question had done something irreversible. It had planted a seed we couldn't dig out, and now it was growing, in her eyes, in our home, in the quiet space between every breath we shared. Harper decided to visit her parents for the weekend. She said she needed some air, but I could tell it was more than that. When she packed her bag, she avoided my eyes. She kissed Noah goodbye, lingered for a second longer than usual, then walked out the door without saying when she'd be back. That evening, I called her. She said they'd had dinner, roast chicken, her father's favorite, and that she'd tell them about the doctor's question. I heard the hesitation in her voice. "Maybe he'll know something," she whispered. Later, she told me how it went. After dinner, Harper sat at the table with her parents, the plate still half full. She tried to keep her tone casual as she mentioned the ultrasound, the extra toe, the doctor's strange question. Her mother frowned, confused. Her father, Richard, froze. She said he stopped chewing. His hand trembled as he set down his fork. "6 toes?" he repeated softly. Then he fell silent. Harper said she'd never seen him look so pale. Her mother asked, "What's wrong?" But he didn't answer. He just excused himself and went upstairs. Harper sat there, stunned. She tried to convince herself it was nothing. Maybe shock, maybe guilt. But when he came back down later, his face was different. Drawn, heavy, almost afraid. He asked to speak with her alone. They sat in the living room, the lights dimmed, the clock ticking between them. He didn't look at her when he began to speak. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "Harper, there's something I never told you. It was long before I met your mother. I was young, broke, desperate. I wanted to buy a car, finish school. I sold my sperm to a donor bank. It was anonymous, legal, but..." He stopped, pressing a hand over his mouth. "I never thought I'd need to mention it, not after all these years." She said her heart dropped. "Dad, what are you saying?" He looked at her then, eyes filled with something worse than fear, guilt. "I don't know who they gave it to, but if your husband's mother ever used a donor, then maybe..." She shook her head violently. "No, that's insane. That can't be true." He didn't argue. He just whispered, "I pray to God it isn't, but Harper, it's possible." Her legs gave out. She said she couldn't breathe. The thought was too wild, too cruel to believe. She asked, voice breaking, "Are you saying Owen could be your son?" He didn't answer right away. Then slowly, painfully, he nodded. "I'm sorry," he said. "I was stupid. I never thought something like this could happen." Harper cried in silence. Her father tried to reach for her hand, but she pulled away. When she told me later over the phone, her voice was barely a whisper. "Owen, I think something's wrong. I think he's hiding something that changes everything." I didn't understand at first. But as she told me the story, every piece began to fall into place, slow and merciless. And though I tried to tell her it was impossible, a cold, unfamiliar dread began to crawl through me, the kind that comes when love collides with something darker than either of us could name. It was past midnight when I felt a hand shaking my shoulder. I opened my eyes to find Harper standing over me, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying. The baby monitor was still on the nightstand, its soft green light casting a faint glow between us. She whispered, "Owen, wake up. I need to ask you something." I sat up, half asleep. "What's wrong?" Her voice trembled. "Your mother, has she ever told you anything about your father?" For a second, I didn't understand the question. Then, something inside me went still. I rubbed my face, trying to find words that wouldn't sound as strange as they were. "No," I said quietly. "She's never talked about him." Harper didn't move. She just stared at me, waiting. I sighed. She always said she didn't need a husband, that she wanted a child, not a man. I was born through artificial insemination, from an anonymous donor. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. She looked as though the air had been sucked from her lungs. I felt it too. The same heavy, impossible thought crawling into the space between us. She took a step back, whispering, "Owen, what if—" I shook my head before she could finish. "No, don't say it." But it was too late. The words were already alive, pressing against the silence. I could see the panic in her eyes. The same fear I'd seen in the doctor's office, only sharper now, rooted in something real. Her father's confession, my mother's silence, two separate stories suddenly clicking together like puzzle pieces that were never meant to fit. I said her name, trying to pull her back, but she turned away, covering her mouth with her hand. "It makes sense," she said, her voice breaking. "The timing, the city, the bank, everything." "Stop." I stood up, my heart pounding. "We don't know anything yet. It's just a coincidence." But I didn't believe it. Not fully. I could feel the truth circling us like a predator, patient, certain. After a long silence, she looked at me again, her face streaked with tears. "We have to know," she whispered. "We can't live like this." I nodded slowly. "Then we'll find out." That night, we sat together on the couch, the room dim except for the flicker of the streetlight outside. Neither of us spoke much. She kept her hand over mine, gripping tight, as if afraid one of us might disappear. When she finally fell asleep on my shoulder, I stayed awake, staring at the shadows on the wall, thinking about my mother, her calm voice, her careful answers, the way she always avoided talking about the past. In that quiet, I realized something I hadn't wanted to see before. My whole life, I'd told myself that not knowing my father didn't matter, that love was enough, that family was what you built, not what you were born into. But now, that lie had a name. And by morning, we both knew what we had to do. We ordered a DNA test, 2 kits, 2 swabs, 2 drops of truth we could no longer hide from. 3 weeks later, the envelope arrived. Plain white. No return address, just my name, Owen White, written neatly across the front. It was smaller than I expected, lighter, but the weight of it was unbearable. Harper was in the kitchen when I brought it in. She froze when she saw it in my hand. Neither of us spoke. For a long time, all we could hear was the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. "Do you want me to open it?" I asked. She nodded once. Her face was pale, her fingers twisted in the hem of her sweater. I sat down at the table. My hands were trembling. The paper tore too easily. I unfolded the document, black letters printed neatly across a page that would destroy everything we had built. My eyes stopped at one line. Result: paternal relationship confirmed with a probability of 99.98%. I felt something collapse inside me. Harper stepped closer. "What does it say?" I couldn't answer. The words wouldn't leave my mouth, so I just handed her the paper. She read it once, then again. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Then she screamed, a sound that didn't even sound human, and stumbled back, clutching her stomach as if the air itself had turned against her. I tried to reach for her. "Harper." She shook her head violently. "No, no, it can't be." The page slipped from my hand and fell to the floor. I stared at it, at the proof that the woman I loved more than anything was my sister, half of me, written in DNA. I sank to my knees. The room spun. All the air seemed to drain out of the house. We stayed like that for a long time, both frozen, both broken, as if time itself had stopped to watch us unravel, all those years, the laughter, the vows. The nights whispering about our future, every touch, every kiss, suddenly rewritten into something forbidden, something cruel. Harper crawled to the corner of the room, pulling her knees to her chest. Her voice was small, shaking. "What do we do now?" I didn't have an answer. There was no logic for this. No system error to fix, only a truth that burned through everything I thought I knew about love, about fate, about who I was. I wanted to scream, to run, to tear that paper apart and pretend it never existed. But no matter how hard I tried to deny it, the number kept echoing in my head. 99.98, the kind of certainty no one survives. And in that moment I realized, the greatest tragedy isn't finding out you're connected by blood. It's realizing the person you love most in the world is the one you were never meant to find. We didn't speak for days after the results. The house felt hollow, as if something sacred had been ripped out of it. Harper moved through the rooms like a ghost, avoiding my eyes, avoiding the world. Every sound, the kettle, the baby monitor, the creak of the floor, felt too loud in the silence that had taken over our lives. One night, I found her sitting in the nursery, holding Noah. She looked up at me with a softness that broke my heart. "I can't hate you," she whispered. "I tried, but I can't." I sat beside her. "You shouldn't have to try. None of this is our fault." We stayed like that for a long time, listening to our son's breathing. The weight of the truth pressed between us, but somehow in that stillness, I felt something new, not happiness, not peace, but a strange kind of surrender. We didn't talk about divorce. It never even came up. The idea of leaving her felt worse than the truth itself. I loved her. Not as a sister, not as a mistake of fate, but as the woman who had been my life for nearly a decade. Harper put the baby down and turned to me. "We can't have any more children," she said quietly. "We can't risk it." I nodded. "I know." She took my hand, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't pull away. "Then what do we do now?" I looked at her, at the woman I loved more fiercely than I understood, and said, "We live. We don't change what we can't undo, but we can choose how to live with it." Her eyes filled with tears. She nodded slowly, pressing her forehead against mine. "Then we keep it between us," she whispered. "No one needs to know." And that was our decision. Quiet, unspoken, final. We would carry this truth alone. We never told our parents, never told the doctors. The papers burned in the fireplace that same night, the ashes drifting into the air like the remains of a world that no longer belonged to us. We built a new one, smaller, quieter, hidden. Our love changed shape. It became something deeper, darker, almost sacred in its defiance. We stopped asking why and started asking how to keep living, how to protect our son, how to love without breaking. Sometimes, when I watch Harper sleeping, I think about how fragile everything is, how one secret from decades ago could rewrite 2 entire lives. I know people would call what we have wrong. Maybe they'd be right, but love doesn't always fit inside what's acceptable. Sometimes, it just is. We can't change the blood that runs through our veins, but we can decide what it means, to us and to the life we choose to keep. And maybe that's the truest kind of love there is, the kind that survives, even after the truth kills everything you once believed in.